thing I also got inspired when you said is about, let's say a person says, I want 4% productivity increase. This is too narrow sometimes, or even what is a problem statement when people say this kind of things. I
Yeah.
get a feeling, oh, can a problem statement solve the problem? So this is sometimes I sit with, because one problem, one statement limits seeing there are so many possibilities to learn from the problem.
Yeah.
What is your thinking on that?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Like what's really been helpful to me is Ron Heifetz's distinction between technical problems and adaptive challenges.
Mm, mm,
And technical problems are are problems where you can define the problem in sort of operational terms,
mm,
and so they lend themselves to sort of process and procedure kinds of solutions. I'll give
mm,
you an example. You
mm,
know, what's the best way to lift a patient so that you don't strain your back? That's a technical problem. You can
mm,
figure that out, right?
mm,
And you can apply technical solutions, even a technology or process or procedures, or here's a checklist, or those sorts of things.
mm,
And what we do in business schools, for example, is we train people in how to solve technical problems, whether they're finance problems or marketing problems, or even the way we typically approach managerial problems is
mm,
from that mindset. And so most managers are trained to think that way. And
mm,
as a result, they're trained to identify problems in that way. They'll start by trying to turn it into a technical problem.
mm,
And one of Heifetz's, I think he said this, is that the greatest failure of leadership is to treat an adaptive challenge like a technical problem.
mm,
Right?
mm,
I think this is the kind of problems that leaders feel stuck and aren't successful at changing,
mm,
are adaptive challenges.
mm,
And so an adaptive challenge is something like, you know, um, how do we get patients to, or um, how do we increase the health and safety of our employees?
mm,
So the technical problem is how do we lift patients so that you don't strain your back? The
mm,
adaptive challenge is how do we increase the health and safety of our employees,
mm,
right? And when you frame the problem that way, then it becomes much more complex,
mm,
right? It doesn't lend itself to
mm,
process and procedures kind of solutions.
mm,
I'll give you an example of my own consulting work. I was
mm,
asked to do some work with miners in Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia has a large mining company. It's called Ma'aden,
mm,
and this was part of a leadership development process for them. And part of it was they were supposed to be working on real challenges and implementing change. And one of them was mine safety. And
mm,
they had had a lot of problems getting their miners to uh, act in more safe ways. They had safety accidents, and it was too high, and they were supposed to drive it down. And so they had been treating this, because they're engineers, like a technical problem, right? Like search for best practices, set up a lot of policies and rules and procedures, try to drive this down through the organization, and it wasn't working.
mm,
And I'm sitting with them, and they're complaining like, here's this guy picking up this stuff, and his gloves are sitting there, and the supervisor said, "Why aren't you putting on your gloves?" And they're saying, "I don't need my gloves. It's a hassle. It just takes more time." And the big issue was that all these policies and procedures added more time and effort to the work that the workers had to do, and they didn't want to do it. Okay?
mm,
So, uh, so it's such a typical problem of this attempt to, like, figure out what's the right answer, and
mm,
then drive an implementation process down that the people you're asking to change have had no say in.
mm,
And for whatever reason, they're not wanting to do it. And a lot of times, I don't even know why. They won't even tell you what the real reason is. I remember one organization where they were having a heck of a time getting the employees to shift this thing. And then it turned out the reason that was happening was because a number of them weren't getting, they would no longer get an opportunity to play their card game at lunchtime. And that's why they really didn't want to do it. But, that wasn't coming up in the meetings. But anyway, so getting back to the Saudi Arabian mining engineers, so we started investigating, okay, well, what would be a purpose that would bring these miners into conversations where they would come up with their own ways to improve safety. And the frame they came up with was easy safety. How do we get easy safety? Right? That became their generative image.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, and that you bring the people who are going to have to change into those dialogues. How do we get more easy safety? And they go, well, okay, we could do this, we could do that. It's their, they make the decision. That it's their idea, and they say, great, go do it. Yeah. So I agree with you. It's like the framing of the problem is so, and almost our managers are trained to frame problems as technical challenges, and then apply technical rationality to trying to solve them. I don't know what it's like in India. Like in North America, there's a fetish now. It's called best practice. Like everybody wants to have best practice. What's the best practice? But there is no best practice for an adaptive challenge, because it's going to be different for everybody depending on the context you're in, the people you're dealing with, the politics of the situation. I mean, on and on. So, yeah, but best practice works for simple problems, where there's a technical way to fix things, but not for complex ones.
And for me, sometimes the sad part, the technical measures are set, and people performance is also measured on that. Sometimes I'm feeling that is also very limiting, because I am measured on this.
Yeah, but I mean, measuring the wrong thing is not helpful, but if you can measure the right thing, it's very useful. I think. Right? I think that's what causes the strain. Like what I noticed, because early in my career, I was involved in total quality management sorts of things. And one of the things we discovered was that in terms of the quality of work life, good measures are fantastic. Like if you're being measured on the right things and those measures are giving you information on how to improve, then, it's like that creates a kind of a level playing field in a sense, where, right? But what happens is if the measures are arbitrary, or you don't trust the numbers, or or it's actually measuring the wrong thing. Like one of the examples early in my consulting career was telephone company I was working with. They wanted their operators to improve their customer service, but what they were measuring them on was speed of answer. That was their number one measure. How quickly can you get off the phone and answer the next call? So we're measuring on how quickly you get off the phone, but what we want you to do is improve your customer service. It's crazy. So stuff like that drives people crazy. Right? Yeah. But on the other hand, it's very difficult to create an empowered work system where you're not relying on hierarchy to make all the decisions if you don't have a set of numbers that are telling you whether or not you're succeeding or failing objectively, right? Because if you've got those numbers objectively, then everybody can be engaged in a rational process of trying to come up with better answers and trying things out and experimenting and so on. But if you don't have good numbers, then, well, it's a power move. Somebody just decides this is what we're going to do, and they got the power to make other people do it.
So the measure is important. What we are measuring is even more important.